Africa's food landscape is as diverse as its people, with thousands of cultures shaping what and how people eat. Despite this richness, the continent now faces a complex mix of nutritional challenges, from undernutrition to rising obesity in urban areas. As traditional diets give way to processed foods, some researchers are now working to understand and guide these dietary shifts. By adapting sensory science to local contexts and promoting the use of underutilized crops, they aim to improve both nutrition and food sustainability across Africa. The professor in the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences at the University of Pretoria, Riëtte de Kock, joins us now for more. Professor, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the late edition.
Good evening.
Now, Prof, could you share your perspective on how traditional African diets have changed in recent decades, especially in the urban areas, and what role you see sensory science in helping guide or even influence these dietary transitions?
Yes, sensory science is the research field where we investigate how people perceive products with their senses. In my case, the products are food, so I study the taste, the smell, the texture and mouthfeel, and even the sound of food. And this is important because the sensory properties of food have such a big influence on what we choose to eat. Essentially, all people want to eat food that they like and that they perceive as tasty. And the objective of our sensory science research is to balance the cost, but also the nutritional value with the sensory properties of food, so that the food meets the needs of people, but also contribute positively to health outcomes.
And Prof, as you've studied the sensory properties of food, have you perhaps developed or even modified any sensory testing tools, to sort of better align with local languages, local literacy levels, or even cultural norms?
Yeah, it's very important that the sensory testing that we apply are inclusive. So the food industry need to take key steps. When they test products, they should recruit diverse testing panels. They should include people of different cultures, ages, income levels, and food traditions, but also literacy levels. So the industry needs to adapt testing methods to local contexts. You need to use appropriate language, familiar scales, and food types that people recognize. And this is important, for example, to partner with local researchers and local community groups to better understand the traditional food preferences and habits. And it's also important to invest in regional sensory labs and training facilities, so that we build capacity around South Africa, but also on the continent. Because all of this can help food companies to create food that better reflect the tastes, the textures, and the values of people around the continent and also in our country.
Prof, I'm actually glad that you touched on the investment of regional labs. And having said that, can you perhaps give examples where sensory science helped improve product development from indigenous crops to make them even more appealing to modern consumers, as it were?
Yes, if you think of modern consumers and urbanization, people are looking for comfort but they're also looking for tradition. So we want easy to access meals, we want quick and convenient meals, but we still want that traditional taste in a modern way. So we are using modern food technology to create products that appeal to people, but that also reflect tradition and culture, and that's very important.
And how do you balance nutritional benefits with sensory appeal in reformulating traditional dishes or products?
As I said, everyone wants something that tastes well. I can give an example of a staple food in East Africa where we are changing from refined maize meal as a school feeding meal, for example, to whole grain maize meal, which is more nutritious. But it gives sensory challenges. So Whole grain products are stronger flavors, more difficult to handle, so you need to get used to it. And we need to optimize the sensory properties of those meals to make it appealing, but also deliver the much needed nutritional benefit that is required. And that's the challenge, making products that are still appealing, but also deliver in terms of nutritional value.
Yeah. And I guess the main point here is making products that are more appealing. So have you found any generational differences in terms of, acceptance of the traditional and indigenous foods? And how has that influenced your approach?
Yes, often if you think about it, you talked about traditional, if I think, for example, in cities, young people are moving to the cities, and one of the big challenges in food preparation is time to cook, for example, traditional food. So people tend to opt for more Western style foods, and that becomes trendy and aspirational. But at heart, often people are still looking for that traditional home cooked meals. And for us as the food industry, it's a challenge, but it's something that we need to do, is to deliver traditional food products, but in a modern way, in a modern context. And that's the challenge, something that we need to address. So young people are definitely challenged by speed, time, access to traditional ingredients is often a problem. Modern marketing, people are living in small spaces, so it's more difficult to cook traditional foods, and then they tend to opt for fast foods that are often not necessarily their true culture.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but before I let you go, Prof, if there's one message you'd like to share with policymakers, educators and food entrepreneurs about the future of African diets, what would that be?
Future of African diets is optimize the sensory properties of healthy food products. We eat with our eyes. We eat with what we taste, how we eat, how we swallow is very important. And the challenge is make healthy food products, locally relevant food products, make them desirable and appealing, so that people choose those products for their diet.
All right, Professor de Kock, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Well, that was Professor Riëtte de Kock she's the professor in the Department of Consumer and Food Sciences at the University of Pretoria, just talking to us about adapting sensory science to local context and promoting the use of underutilized crops.